Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here at Earth and Sky. Those of you joining us online, we always appreciate each and every single one of you. And we're going to be talking about so much today. This is Karmic Law number 12 in our series of the 12 laws of karma and what they mean to you and how you can implement them in your life to have the best life possible with the way that you can understand how the universe works, how the laws of the universe govern, and how your role in that is such an integral part of you being able to control your destiny and your reality and what you want to receive in this life. Today we're going to be talking about what you give out and what you receive, and mercy and truth, and how all of those interact. So I'm just going to go ahead and get right on into it. This is the law of value and uplifting. The law that talks about what value you bring into the world and what comes back to you, and what it is that you do that maybe lifts others up or brings others down, and how that impacts you. Sometimes you may think that you're doing great things for somebody else because you're doing it out of what your truth is, and maybe it's not actually the best thing for that other person. And then what does that mean with karma? Oh my gosh, this can be so confusing sometimes, but it's really not. It's really very simple as you boil it down. The great things that you contribute may not be reflected right back at you immediately, but they do increase the collective good. You may have felt like at times in your life, no matter how much good you tried to do or how you felt like you were doing the right thing all the time, and you just feel like you're being punished all the time, or you never quite get your break. And maybe you feel like you see other people and you feel like you're looking at them thinking, well, they're not really living the right way. They're not doing all of these good things that I'm doing in the world or for my community or my family, and yet they get rewarded all the time. And how is that fair? But when you start really learning to share for the sake of sharing, being able to really separate yourself from what you're expecting to receive within yourself, and you're completely separating your purpose of why you do certain things the way you do, and instead you're doing it for the good of the collective, for the good of the world, or your family, or your friends, however broad your circle may be, or however small you might bring it into yourself, learning how to really pay attention to each of the things that you choose to do, and to do those things simply for the sake of sharing, knowing that it might not result in an exact reward back to you, but the collective good, the collective reward that ends up shining through that is eventually going to be lifting your world up as well. By doing your best, you automatically increase your way in the value of the whole. By doing your best your way, you automatically increase the value of the whole. Sometimes we need to also really think about what is doing your best. Is doing your best something that comes just from your own truth and what you feel is best? Or are you really taking into account, how does this impact the other person that I'm doing this with? Sometimes we see this in relationships when we talk about love languages, and people might be in a very good relationship for a very long time, yet they always feel like they're just not quite meeting each other in the place where they're looking for that real strength of understanding, feeling that the other person understands them fully. In love languages, sometimes we talk about the different ways that you receive love. Maybe it's words of affirmation, or maybe it's gifts, or other things as well. And the other person, your other partner, whether a romantic partner or a friendship, this also applies even in relationships with coworkers and bosses, because we all receive that feeling of the light and the feeling of love in different ways depending on what we value within ourselves. When you learn how to pull yourself up out of yourself, and instead of just giving in the way that you would like to receive, and instead you listen and you speak with your ears open and you pay attention to what other people are saying, they would like to have and what brings meaning to them and what they find value in. And then you start contributing to them in the way that means the most to them. You're going to see things begin opening up, so much expanding in those relationships. And then also, of course, being willing to voice yourself as well, to express your needs, but first, learning to just share for the sake of sharing in the way that the other people want to receive. We're going to get to this on a global level in just a little bit as well, but there are certain people who throughout history have awakened in millions truth, freedom, peace, and compassion. And when we look at the lives of these people that sometimes we revere as really great leaders, sometimes those leaders may have been greatly revered by certain groups of people and really not revered at all by other groups of people. And sometimes those leaders that are trying to impact the world in a certain way may be walking in with their own version of truth in the way that they think things are right, and they really believe with their whole hearts and minds that they're doing the right thing. They're liberating someone, or they're bringing the message of peace, or they're trying to bring in different culture to a different area, and they feel like this is the best for everyone. But they don't always listen first. They don't always engage those situations with their ears open to see how that is impacting the people that they're trying to impact, and do those people want to be impacted that way. We need to do this on a smaller scale in our lives as well as on this bigger scale, where we really take stock when you're feeling like you're ready to take action with something, whether on a really big level, if you're a leader in something, a leader in industry, or a leader in politics or anything else, or if you're just wanting to be a leader in your own marriage, or a leader in your relationship with your parent or your child, or the school that you're involved in, whatever it is, the first thing you need to do is to really listen to see what is it that the impact is, that the value is of where you're placing this value and what they would like to receive from it as well. Is it, in fact, welcomed, the idea that you have? Is it truly your truth and the way you see the world, and being absolutely perfect and ideal, and you may feel like everyone should have this exact same truth within themselves, and if they don't, they just don't understand. But when you're doing that, you're leading from in Kabbalah, we would call it the right column, which is a column of judgment, where we feel like if you don't understand the truth that I'm leading from, and you don't see that this is the way of peace, or this is the way that is right, then this judgment comes in and feels like, but I'm leading with it anyway, and you'll figure out that this is better, or you can just step out of the way. That when it's filled with judgment like that, it really doesn't have the best impact that it can, and you're not going to be receiving the rewards of karma that you may feel like are so justly due. You may feel like you're dedicating so much of your life or your time or the emotions that you've put into this, trying to figure it out in the way that you feel is best. And yet none of that comes back to being rewarded, because it's all done out of judgment and leading with your own personal truth. Instead, if you lean into mercy, if you lean into the left column of things, the feminine column of things, and you start to instead embrace the fact of recognizing before you take action, before you come up with a plan that you feel like adds all of this value, that you listen to the others that will be impacted by this. Often we see this so much in different marriages or close relationships, where people will feel like they absolutely have just the right way and their partner will be so happy with this, and they just aren't, and they feel like their needs aren't being met. So listen first. Always speak with your ears open and come up with a plan together, and then be willing to give for the sake of sharing, even if it feels like that is not the right way to yourself. Even if you feel like you're not sure how that is supposed to cause happiness, if you're giving something, time, attention, resources to someone else, it should be done in a way that makes sense with both of you, collaborating that together, because your truth and their truth might might be quite different from each other, but when you listen to each other and you come into the middle, you can find this place where this great light is open, this great spiritual beacon of hope and light, and this collaboration of the truth comes in between both of you. In and of themselves, often when we look at some of these leaders that have been very renowned for great peace efforts or great times of transition and helping to change and shift the dynamics of the world, you may notice that their own personal lives are often not that easy. They tend quite often not to be very opulent, but the value that they add to millions upon millions of lives can be immeasurable. Yet at the same time, it does give me a little bit of pause when we think about the fact from the Kabbalistic perspective of thinking of, is that truth that they were pouring out there, that view, that vision of the world that they felt was absolutely perfect and just and the best for everyone, yet maybe wasn't exactly what everyone else wanted? Then maybe if they had instead met in the middle and continued to cause huge shift of change, but bringing people together, perhaps we would see more of a change that you would see expand within their own lives as well. I was a little surprised quite some time ago when I was talking with somebody that was from India, and they said that Mother Teresa is so revered throughout so much of the world, yet many of the people that were in the area that he lived in India were not a big fan of her at all, because she came in and she did things the way she wanted to do it and did not want to listen to what they were requesting or how they thought the needs should be met or what things they felt should be respected. And so even as so many needs were met, and even as she sacrificed her entire life to give, to share, to help, to increase the value in that part of the world, there was this disconnect of how it all was happening. So when we look at some of the there are other leaders that we can see that really tried to find a balance, that really tried to bring in this balance, to listen, to always speak with that lens of compassion. Mandela was one of them that was, even when he was in the trenches, in prison, he never stopped listening to what people were actually saying. All of the things that he kept saying for advice or things that he was doing were often impacting the world at large, but often they were things he was doing for himself, depriving of himself as he was trying to have this impact, raising the element of world peace. And there's so many different aspects of each of these that could be controversial as you really think deeply into them. So it is so important to look within your own life and the impact that you're making and really examine every action that you're doing and look at it to think, am I doing this simply for the sake of sharing, not in the way that I feel like is just my truth and just what I think is best, but have I talked to whoever I feel like I'm about to impact to see if this is something that they even want, if this is a way that they would like to be impacted, helped, encouraged, inspired, or whatever it is, and really bring that in. And sometimes in those discussions, there might be things that can get a little charged up because you might find that there are some disagreements that you really don't feel like you're meeting on the same page at all with. But it's through getting through that. It's through allowing yourself to not be reactive. Instead, just to learn to pause, to listen, and then learn how to collaborate so that you can share for the sake of sharing in the way that it wants to be received. That is an amazing way to show that you value the person or the situation or the culture that you are seeking to have an impact on. And in doing that, you'll be not only uplifting them, but also uplifting your own life as you come in with this great degree of light while also listening and collaborating instead. Sometimes this law is called the law of significance and inspiration. One gets from something whatever they put into it is kind of what we often think of with the law of karma. What you put in is what you get out. But truly, it is a lot deeper than that. Yes, there's a lot of truth to that, but it goes so much deeper than that. It really is the value on the level of the soul, not just the value at the surface level of the action. So often we may do something and feel like maybe you did something really nice for a friend of yours, and then the next week you're really upset because they weren't immediately there for you if you had something going on for yourself, and perhaps you didn't even ask saying that you needed something, help with something, but you felt like they should have known because you felt you knew at one point. And then that ends up creating this space of separation between people instead of allowing them to come together. And so it's really important to recognize, we see that within this, where sometimes people feel that what you put into something is a 1-for-1 of what you feel you should get out of it. But instead, seeing that collaboration, seeing that light, and also pulling from knowing that the true value of something is also a result of the direct energy and the intention that you put into it. I think sometimes people will do things begrudgingly, feeling like they should or they need to, or this is the way you're supposed to. So this often comes up when people say, well, I have to because it's family, or I should do this because it's so-and-so. But if that's the attitude that you have with it, and then that's the intention of the energy that's flowing into it, and what you receive from the universe is much more based on the intention. So if it's based out of a need and a have to, instead of out of sharing for the sake of love, sharing for the sake of sharing, and just doing it with that intention of the heart of how it will impact them and not thinking about what it takes from you, when you shift that, you will begin to start seeing more opening up within your life. It would be really good this week to take stock, to examine, to think about which things you're doing in your life, especially when it's for someone else or impacting others, maybe in your community, family, friends, whatever. And as you're doing it, think to yourself, are you doing this because you're supposed to? Society says you're supposed to. Are you doing it because they asked, so you feel like you can't say no? Or are you doing it because it just feels like an offering of love? It really brings that smile up within yourself as you think about what it means to that person, and the work and the effort that you're doing kind of can go by the wayside a bit as you relish instead in the joy that it will bring. That energy goes into the effort that you're putting. You may notice, I know that we had this as an example just this last weekend. We had an overnight sound bath here. And in the morning, when I had served breakfast to the girls, they kept talking about how some of the food was just absolutely amazing, specifically yogurt and granola, which is a pretty simple dish. It wasn't an exquisite or, an abnormal brand of yogurt or granola. But what was different was the love that I put into it, the Reiki energy that I put into it. Each of the things, as I brought them into the house, I filled with Reiki and filled with the essence of love. I smiled, thinking about the fact that they would be eating it and that it would be nurturing them and allowing them to have energy through the day. And as I served it, that same energy, that same feeling and intention went into it, and I believe that is what they were tasting more than just the taste of the food. You may notice that yourself when a friend bakes cookies or a cake. It tastes so much better than when you cook it yourself oftentimes, because that energy of love is in it, and it is tangible and it is palpable when you're doing things for others, whether it is a favor or something that you're just spontaneously doing yourself, or something that maybe really does take a lot from your life and maybe you really don't have time to, but you care enough about them that you do it anyway. When you set your consciousness and your intention to really filling it with love and then just releasing it and letting it go, not expecting a reward in return, that is when you're raising yourself into this higher level of consciousness where this 12th law of karma really comes in. As you are adding the value, it begins to lift you up as well. It begins to bring in this burst of inspiration as well. One of the examples that I thought was quite interesting with one of my mentors recently. We were talking about our consciousness and how what we expect in our reality and where our consciousness is, maybe not even as much what we expect, but where our consciousness is dictates everything that happens around us. He had gone to a store a couple weeks ago and he'd spent about 3 hours in the store figuring out all of the different things that he wanted, a home goods store, and he had a gift card and he was excited. He actually had time to finally get all of the things and figure out what he wanted. So after 3 hours of curating, there were a couple things that they didn't have that he would have liked, but that was fine. He found other things instead. And then he went to the cashier and he had a gift card that had previously had a return on it, or had previously had a return, and he thought that when that had been returned, the returned amount would be loaded right back onto that same gift card. And when he was at the cashier, he was surprised to find that they said, no, there was no balance on the gift card. And through some digging, they said that it was actually on a different gift card that would be mailed to him, but it hadn't been received yet. So at this point, he was starting to feel in a little bit of a rush. He'd been there for about 3 hours looking for everything. And then when he found out it was mailed, he asked if they could just search that credit card number and then add it, and then he would discard the card when it arrived. But they said, no, you need a PIN number and we can't do that. And so he was trying to figure out how else he could do this where he wasn't going to be wasting that 3 hours. And also the ride getting to and from this place in New York City can be quite a pain as well. So he asked if he purchased the items, could he then just bring the receipt back in and have it returned and then switched onto the gift card at that point? And they said, no, you have to bring in every single item instead, because we won't just use the receipt. So he's getting pretty irritated at this point. The customer service person was not friendly about any of this at all. And so he started to think very poorly about the store and had to leave everything there at that point. And so he started processing that a little bit after he left. And he could have easily just thought that store is terrible. I never really want to go back there again, and their customer service, and then just applied that across the board to everyone. I think sometimes it can be easy for our consciousness to do that. And about 2 weeks later, after he had received the gift card in the mail, a lot of times people might have that same expectation going back to the store, thinking, I wonder what kind of nightmare customer service I'll have. Will they even have the items that I want? But instead, what he thought was, and not naming the name of the store, he thought the name of this store might have been bad then, but it might be really great now. What if it was just bad on that day, and it's really great right now, and it's going to be an amazing day as I go through and I look at everything there. And when he did go in, and you can probably already envision within your own mind, if you start shifting that with every bad experience you have in your life and expecting, instead of expecting the same thing, expecting it to be good, you might experience what he did. So when he went into the store, he noticed that they had those things that he had hoped that they would have, but had been out of stock. The associate told them those were usually out of stock, so it was really nice they were in. He found every single thing that he wanted that day. He actually found a couple of the items that were on sale that were not on sale previously, and when he checked out at the counter, the associate asked him for a loyalty card ID, which they normally never remind him of, and he never remembers. And that ended up saving quite a bit more while he was there as well. And he had this amazing experience. The cashier was very friendly. Everyone who helped him in the store was wonderful. And so shifting that consciousness, shifting that expectation, allowed his reality around him to meet where his consciousness was. We see this oftentimes in life where you start out a day and maybe you stub your toe getting out of bed, and then you find that the coffee maker messes up and you feel like you might say to yourself, this is going to be a really bad day. Maybe you get late to work and then you feel like, yep, this is a really bad day. And you start sinking those things into your head, whatever those things are that make you feel like this is not working out well at all. But instead, you could start to shift yourself and think, ouch, that really hurt my toe. what a mess I have on the coffee maker. At least I got it out of the way now in the beginning of the day. The rest of the day is going to be amazing. All of that part is done, and you truly set your expectation that the rest of the day is going to be amazing. And you look forward to what will happen and the interactions that you will have. You might even choose to psycho-navigate your day a little bit, where you start visualizing how the day is going to go. What interactions will you have? How will those go? See it in your mind, and then you start really creating that very strong. We are creating worlds around us all the time, within our mind, within our heart, with where we set our consciousness. As you consciously choose to do those things, you visualize it and you say within yourself, this is going to be a great day. You may feel like you're having a conversation coming up, and maybe it's a conversation you really don't want to have with somebody. You can tell it might have a little bit of a confrontation feel, and instead you want to be proactive with it and instead of reactive, and set your consciousness first. Don't set your consciousness up for a fight, but instead set yourself to where you're going to be listening with your ears, because so often so many confrontations are all about people not feeling that they can hear each other, and it feels like there's this big chasm between them, this great space between them, and getting through that can be like hitting a brick wall on both sides. So instead, set your mind ahead of time that you are going to listen, that this is going to be a good conversation, that you will listen to their truth, that you will speak your truth, and that you will then find a beautiful common ground in the middle. Think about the value that they would like when you're impacting someone else, as well as the value that you feel that you would add, and see how those will meet in the middle, so that you're truly lifting things up in your life and in the world around you. I know I threw a whole lot of different things at you today, kind of quickly. With this, there's so much with this law of value and uplifting and significance and inspiration, but I hope that gives you a little bit of food for thought and some things to try out this week as well. So truly think of trying out how you can listen, even as you're speaking. Make sure your ears are open, and especially before you speak, listen first so that you can find this beautiful place in the middle where that you meet. Learn what other people are looking for around you, but in a way where you feel that you are adding that value in the world, because it's important to always find that balance of what you give and when you also need to give to yourself, and how you add value to yourself as well. And also thinking about psycho-navigating this week. Visualize your day, see it, create it in the upper worlds around you, so that it begins to come into this conscious physical realm that we see. Think about each of the things that trigger you this week as well, and think about how is it that it triggered you? What is that showing you within yourself? And how could you have considered this law of value to be able to change that, to turn that into something that is lifting up instead? We always look forward to hearing your comments and the way that you're implementing the things that you learn and the things that you try out each week. So please feel free to comment below. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button on our channel, and we will see you next week. Thank you.